Hello and welcome to the final episode of the week that was, TIOL's weekly news roundup.
Let's have a quick look at the news highlights this week before moving on to the news in detail.
The Karnataka state government has set up India's first multi-sector startup fund with an earmarked kitty of Rs 400 crore, which is targeted to support 20,000 startups in the next 3 years. The state government that recently amended its startup policy has received a record number of 600 applications within 1 week. With registration, startups can enjoy benefits of funding, help and mentorship. Each workable idea may receive up to Rs 50 lakhs. Separate funds are earmarked for women entrepreneurs.
There is one more FAQ on Income Declaration Scheme 2016. The CBDT has amended the rules to provide an option to the declarant in the fair market value of immovable property by applying the cost inflation index to the stamp duty value of the property. The FAQ further clarifies that where loans, creditors, advances received, share capital, payables, etc. are disclosed in audit balance sheet but are fictitious in nature and cannot be directly linked to the acquisition of a particular asset, then such fictitious liabilities can be disclosed under the scheme as such without linking the same with an investment in any specific asset. The period of holding of assets declared under the scheme shall be taken on the basis of actual date of acquisition of such assets and not from 1st June 2016 as clarified earlier.
The NITI Aayog has recommended monetization of assets of public sector loss-making companies. It has identified 26 such PSUs whose land may be offered to state governments or other central public sector companies or banks as a resource for investment in new projects.
Now for the news in detail. Taking a bribe is certainly an offence, but what about offering a bribe?
For the first time, a parliamentary committee has proposed to make bribe giving a punishable offence under the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. This effectively means the boundaries of corruption may be expanded from public officials to cover the private sector, that is corporates and their top executives and management. Bribe giving could become an offence punishable with fine and jail term from 3 to 7 years. The Select Committee of the Rajya Sabha that examined changes to the Prevention of Corruption Act has also recommended a time-bound trial for corruption cases to be disposed within 2 years. The panel disagreed with the government on inclusion of non-government organizations under the definition of a commercial entity and recommended that charitable services must be exempted from the definition of business. Does this mean charitable organizations and their executives would be out of the purview of an anti-corruption law? Let's find out from Dr. Subramanian Swamy, Member of the Parliament in the Rajya Sabha.
Bribe givers definitely can be prosecuted if they have bribed a public official. We have enough laws for charitable institutions. So why you want it under the Prevention of Corruption Act? See, you have PMLA, we have FCRA, enough laws. I mean, there's no great reason. The question of criminality can be dealt with by the Enforcement Directorate and the Home Ministry. And the Home Ministry can refer it to anybody. You don't need a Prevention of Corruption Act.
These changes could well become a part of the Prevention of Corruption Amendment Bill 2013.
Indian financial institutions have started to implement FATCA CRS in India.
Indian investors were a little surprised recently to receive an email from their friendly financial institutions seeking a FATCA CRS declaration to be made online. Financial institutions have warned that if these declarations are not made before the end of August, their accounts shall be mandatorily closed. FIs all over the world have started implementing the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act or FATCA, an American legislation that seeks to curb tax evasion. America taxes its citizens and residents on their worldwide income. following massive offshore tax evasion by US citizens and residents in 2008, which was abetted by financial institutions, America decided to tighten its rules. It legislated the Foreign Accounts Tax Compliance Act that forces financial institutions to divulge information about their account holders who are US citizens and residents with monies in excess of $50,000. Non-compliant institutions risked being forced out of US markets. America has intergovernmental agreements with 100 countries to bring extraterritorial financial institutions under the FATCA net. European nations signed on and wanted their own FATCA to get similar information about their own citizens and residents. So the OECD, together with G20 countries, developed the Common Reporting Standards or CRS, which is the global standard for automatic exchange of financial account information. India too signed on to implement FATCA CRS norms, and the CBDT issued a notification requiring financial institutions to provide this information to the Income Tax Department. What do FATCA CRS seek to find out from Indian investors? What is done with this information, and what is the difference between FATCA and CRS? Let's find out from Mr. D.P. Sengupta, a globally known international taxation expert.
There are two requirements. Under FATCA, the requirement is to find out the accounts of US citizens and residents, and under the Common Reporting Standard, the requirement is to find out whether the person is actually a resident of India or is also a resident of any other country. And if these criteria are fulfilled, then the banks are required to collect the information and then pass it on to the Income Tax Department, and the Indian competent authority then exchanges that information with the corresponding authority. The idea is to find out the account information in respect of US citizens and US residents, and also the information in respect of residents of other countries.
So, which is more stringent, FATCA or CRS?
The FATCA regulations, in fact, are slightly less stringent than Common Reporting Standard, in that insofar as the individual accounts are concerned, no reporting requirement is necessary if the account balance is less than $50,000. But under the CRS, the Common Reporting Standard, there is no de minimis amount involved.
Will this information remain confidential?
Confidentiality requirements have to be followed. The information is not shared with the public. The information is passed on by the financial institution to the income tax authorities, and then the income tax authorities exchange those information with the relevant authorities of the other country.
Investors are required to make the declarations separately for respective institutions in which they hold their demat or broking accounts or even mutual funds. They are required to report any change in the information to the financial institutions within 30 days. Let's move on to the last news of the day, an economist's vision of GST.
We spoke with Montek Singh Ahluwalia, the former Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission and a key pillar of 1991 reform team. Mr. Ahluwalia spoke to us about the political and legislative challenges the GST bill may face, while being confident the states will come together to support the GST constitutional amendment bill.
If some individual state decides not to opt in, it's perfectly possible for the rest of the country to have a GST, and it won't necessarily apply to the individual state taxes. You know, most states would not do that, because not to join in would put them at a huge disadvantage compared to other states. So I don't see that happening. What you could have is just debates and discussions, how many rates of GST are there going to be? Will there be one basket, two baskets?
Right.
What's going to be excluded? Things like that. And that can become quite complicated, and I just hope that the GST Council will sort that out.
He did not think the exemptions under the GST regime were a good idea, and small and medium enterprises will have to rise above it. Let's hear him.
My personal view has always been that it's a very bad idea to exempt anybody.
Okay.
Because frankly, what does exemption mean? If I'm an SME, I'm paying all the taxes on the inputs. Okay?
Right.
If you exempt me from the output, okay, then basically I still pay these taxes.
Right.
I just don't pay the final tax. But what is worse is that when I sell my product to someone else, since I haven't paid any excise, they don't get a rebate. So, the value, the taxation chain should be continuous.
Okay.
Now, in fact, sometimes what they say is that,
when quizzed about the ideal GST rate, he recommends a band of taxation.
Mr. Arvind Modi of the Finance Ministry did some work on this some time ago.
Yes.
And he came up with a rate of 12%. Okay? The combined rate could be 12%. That's if you have no exemptions. Everything gets covered.
Right.
Obviously the states are going to have some exemptions, whatever. Every country does that.
Right.
More recently, I think about a year ago, the Chief Economic Advisor, Arvind Subramaniam, headed a panel just to go into this question. Now, I think that panel had the best technical expertise available in the country to look at these things. Now, they've come up, I think, with something like 15.5%. And so when I talked to him, he said, well, okay, if you want to be safe, you can put it at 16. Maybe you can even put it at 17, just to be on the safe side. But anything between 15, in my view, let's say between 16 and 17 would be a good rate.
Mr. Ahluwalia has no doubt that the goods and services tax is a game changer and will help to unify the market.
On this note, we conclude this last bulletin of the week that was. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for being with us for 52 weeks. You may still write to us at editor@tiol.in. Have a happy weekend.